All right, good morning. We're back. We're live from Raylene's basement in our very, very, very temporary studio here. So I want to bring on Dave Moody without any further ado. Dave, when I knew that we were not going to be in our big, beautiful studio right out on North Main Street in Barrie because of the flood, I looked at the calendar. I saw that you were coming in, and I'm like, son of a bitch, man. It's like I've been waiting so long. I think a year that I've always wanted to show you this beautiful, beautiful studio with our honker mics and just everything, man. And I was so disappointed, but I'm also so happy that you are here.
Dude, it's theater of the mind. You should know that by now. If you tell people that this is like Howard Stern's studio in New York City, that's what they think. See, you're too on. You gotta stop being honest. This is beautiful. It's opulent. That's not 1972 wood paneling. That's state of the art, dude. You're great. You're flying right now.
No, that's the paneling that we just brought in to make it look like it's 1972.
Yeah,
that's not the real stuff.
My mom's got the vintage 1972 paneling in her basement.
How is her basement? What's the latest?
It doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
It was. I went down there yesterday and I stood up against the wall and you can see the line where the water was.
Sure.
I'm 6'1" and the line was well above my head.
That's crazy.
She had almost 7 feet of water in the basement,
and she's in her upper 80s.
88, yeah. And my brother's been awesome because he lives here, and I don't. I'm in the Carolinas, but he lives here, and he's gutted a lot of stuff out of there. There's, and they're far from the only one. There's a 10-foot pile of debris out in front of the house that they've hauled out of that basement, and it's just they're going to have to tear it down to the studs, tear it down to the concrete foundation, spray it for mold, dehumidify, and then start over.
So you've been in Vermont for a couple of days now.
Yeah,
just after the flood. So you've seen what's going on. Obviously, things are going to be very different tonight up at Thunder Road. There's just yesterday, just in very quick conversations with a few people, there's a lot of mixed feelings about the decision that was made to pull this SRX event tonight at Thunder Road. I think Tony Stewart was supposed to be in town, Kenny Schrader.
Daniel Suarez, Cup Series driver, a bunch of guys.
Yeah. So what say you about this?
I understand why they made the decision. And this decision got made a week ago, literally the day after the flood. I mean, the water was still 7 feet deep on Main Street at that point. So I understand why they made the decision. The optics at that moment probably didn't look real good, right? We're coming to town and we're going to have our little race, and it's just as important as people that have lost their homes. And, the police are going to take time off from emergency operations to come and patrol Thunder Road, and the ambulance crews are going to take time off from rescuing people. None of that would have been true tonight, obviously. Sure. Things have changed in a week. So I'll say that again. I understand why they made the decision, but they lacked some really important knowledge when they made that decision. They don't understand Vermont, and they don't understand Vermonters. And I know the guys that run the show there, and I spoke to Don Hawk about it afterwards, and I said, Hawk, by the time next Thursday night comes, those people are going to need a break. Those people they need something to look forward to right now. They need something to get excited about.
And they need something to be distracted about.
Exactly right. And so, and I give all the credit in the world to Chris Michaud and Pat Malone, who own and operate Thunder Road. They said from the beginning, whether SRX comes or not, we're going racing next Thursday night, and we're going to find a way to make a positive out of this for the people that have worked so hard, and they're doing that with their first responders and emergency workers tonight.
Yeah. Furthermore, maybe it would have been an opportunity for Tony, for Kenny, to give a drive down North Main Street and just have a look.
I agree.
Maybe shake a hand.
Yeah, and if all you're worried about is the optics of it all, hand them a couple of shovels, right? There's plenty of debris down there that still needs to be shoveled up. Hand them a couple of shovels, take a few pictures, and put it online to show that SRX is here and they're compassionate and they're involved. Contribute a couple of $1,000s to this disaster relief effort. I think what they saw as the potential to be overwhelmingly negative publicity could have been really positive publicity.
Yeah.
But again, I understand why when they had to make a decision last Thursday, I understand why they made the call that they did.
So a PR opportunity that was missed.
Yeah.
All right. But you're in town nonetheless. You'll be up at the track tonight, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Do you miss being the announcer of Thunder Road, the voice of Thunder Road?
Desperately. Yes.
You do.
Yes.
They're doing a great job up there, though.
Absolutely. And
they're doing
the
a great
kid
job.
that they've got on the microphone now, it's hilarious because his family sat about 4 rows in front of the announcer's tower for as long as I can remember. He was there in diapers, okay? And the Maynard family, all of them would be looking forward watching the racetrack.
Yeah.
Aaron would be turned around watching me.
Isn't that amazing?
He always wanted to be the track announcer at Thunder Road. And when he got to be like, I don't know what it was, 11, 12, 13 years old, I handed him the microphone and I said, call the street stock heat. And it was the greatest moment of his life, right? And it just embedded in him that that's what he wanted to do. And now he's there, and he's doing it. And he's doing a lot of the same stuff I did when the American Canadian Tour goes and races at White Mountain Motorsports Park in New Hampshire or Oxford Plains in Maine. He's on the microphone, and he's just ripping it off.
But you guys are cut from the same cloth here. It's in you. It's something
Big mouths.
It's innate. I mean, it's who you are. It's what you do, yes, but it's who you are. You were born doing this. Your early days with Ken Squire, who, frankly, worships you.
Well, no, you got that backwards.
I understand the backwards. I know that, but I mean, he was so blessed, so lucky to have you, and he knew right then when you came into his life that he had somebody in the palm of his hand who lived it and breathed it and needed a microphone and wanted to call. And it wasn't just,
taught me. That's the important thing. He taught me everything I know.
And it wasn't just short track racing. It was basketball. It was high school games and whatnot.
The Vermont State Snowplow and Backhoe Championship. The sled dog race that Eric Michaels and I did play-by-play on, despite the fact that we'd had one of those February thaws in Vermont, and they had to move the course so far back in the woods that at no point in our broadcast did we see a single sled dog, but we faked our way through.
Oh my God.
Small market radio,
it's
baby.
Amazing. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So what was we're going to talk about more about the flooding and the resiliency of Vermonters. But what was the inception of your time with WDEV and Ken Squire? How did you become the track announcer? How did you fall into this? You came out of high school where?
Well, honestly, it beats the hell out of me how any of this happened. But I grew up in Montpelier.
Okay.
Montpelier High, class of 1979. My uncle came over from Vermont and took me to my first race when I was 6 years old.
Where?
1967, Thunder Road.
Got it.
And
67.
Yeah, well, I'm old. And
wow.
And from the moment, actually before I walked through the gates, because Thunder Road, right? Where you buy your tickets, you can't see the racetrack.
Sure.
You can hear the racetrack,
yeah.
but you can't see it. And standing in that line with my uncle for probably 15 minutes before we could get our tickets and see it, by the time I ever laid eyes on the race cars, I was already hooked.
You were churning.
Because it was loud and it was smelly and there was people everywhere. And it was the damnedest thing I'd ever seen in my life before I ever even saw it. And we took our seat up in the grandstands at the top of turn one, and we were watching practice. And back then it was, the old flathead coupes. And nobody worried too much about body work back then, right? The cars looked like a plastic bag full of walnuts. They were rough. And we're watching practice, and my uncle says, okay, pick a car. Who's going to win? And there was one car amid this field of junk that shone like a diamond, and it was the black number GT1 for Kendall GT1 motor oil. And I didn't know at the time, but that car was owned by Joey LaCare, who has raced at Thunder Road in all or part of like 6 different decades. And it was immaculate. And the late Larry Granger drove the car. And I told my uncle, he's going to win. And he won his heat race, and he won the semi-feature, and he won the feature. He swept the Triple Crown, and I was hooked forever. If I had picked somebody else, I don't know what would have happened, but I picked well.
So then what? You go through high school. Obviously, you're still a fan. And then how did you meet Squire? And what happened at WDEV? How did that happen?
What happened was he started getting really busy with CBS Sports. He would be all over the world for the CBS Sports Spectacular. One week he'd be doing the World Bodybuilding Championships, and the next week he'd be doing the Acapulco Cliff Divers, and the next week he'd be doing the Daytona 500. But it got to the point where he was on the road a lot, and he couldn't be on the microphone at Thunder Road. And I still don't know for sure, JD, what happened. I think he read a couple of my columns in Speedway Scene. That was one of the gigs I picked up when I went to college, writing a free column about racing for one of the local racing trade papers. I think he read a couple of those and said, okay, here's a kid that loves the sport.
He knows what he's talking about.
And has a workable vocabulary. At
Right.
that time, that was probably the best I could have done. And he just... the other possibility is he looked around and saw me standing there with my finger in my nose and said, there's a kid with time on his hands. I don't know which. But either way, he grabbed me by the collar and he dragged me into the booth and he said, pay attention, I'm going to teach you how to announce. And over the course of the next few months, I'd be in there, and he didn't let me do much at first. It was basically, I announced practice, right? Call practice, tell people where the crappers and the concession stands are, tell them they can't drink in the grandstand, tell them that if they brought a six-pack, they can sit up on Bud Hill. And little by little, he'd let me do a little more.
How old are you around this time?
I was in high school.
Okay.
The first time I ever picked up the microphone at Thunder Road was the summer before my senior year in high school.
Okay.
And every Monday morning, he'd have me in his office at WDEV. And he would just strip the flesh off my bones, right? Here's 5,000 things you did wrong and 5 things that you did right.
Yeah.
And he would give me homework. I mean, he would send me home with homework.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
Next week, come back with a list of 20 different ways to say side by side.
Did you ever want to tell him to pound sand?
It occurred to me, yes, because as you well know, Ken is not a glad-hander. If you're doing something wrong, you're going to be told that you're doing something wrong.
Oh, yeah.
And the praise, there isn't a lot of praise. Working for Ken Squire and the late Tom Curley.
Yeah.
You knew you were doing a good job. You certainly didn't know because they told you, because they were not about patting on the back, patting on the head, giving you a slap on the fanny saying, good job, buddy. Yeah. You knew you were doing a good job if they didn't fire you.
Or if they didn't say anything.
Right. Silence meant you were okay.
Oh,
if your paycheck cleared, you were clearly doing all right.
Yes.
So
wow.
As long as I was still getting those paychecks, I kept on plugging, and he taught me more and more and more and more, and I kind of used my natural gift of gab and made the job my own in certain ways, which he encouraged me to do always, and here we are now. And
you're doing high school sports at the same time, and then the birth of the Inside Groove on WDEV. What was the start of that?
That started out at WVMT in Colchester. The late Ernie Farrar.
Yeah. Legend.
Yeah. And he called me up. I wrote that column for Speedway Scene, and he read it, and he called me up. I was living in the Marsh Hall dormitory at UVM, and he called me up and he said, I'm doing a racing show, an hour every Monday night. Could you come on and do like a 3-minute commentary, talk about whatever you want to do? I'm just looking to fill an hour.
Yeah.
Okay, sure. I'd be happy to do that. And I did it for probably 3 or 4 weeks, and then Ernie called me back, and I figured he was calling to say, listen, you're not very good, and we're going to go in a different direction. He called me up, and he said, could you come in on Monday mornings and record this show? I'd like you to co-host with me. So that turned into a co-host deal for a couple of years. And then, Ernie being the morning man, he was out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning and on the air at 6.
Sure.
Going to races on Sunday night was not his idea of fun,
right.
Especially when we're in Ontario somewhere. So he finally said, listen, you host the show. I'm out of here. We moved it to DEV. It still stayed on WVMT, but it moved it to VMT and did it for, I don't know, what, a decade and a half, something like
a
that. It
long
was
time.
a long, long time.
And at one point, I was your board op.
Yes, you were.
I was pushing the buttons for you, which was a trip. And I'll never forget. And I was, this was towards the early part of my career in radio. But working with you, Dave, it wasn't like we're sitting right here at the same table at DEV. There's all of these sectioned out.
It is the house that Jack built.
It is. I mean, there's just so much plexiglass and so much separation for studios that we couldn't really communicate very well. So
we could have used American Sign Language if we had known it, but we developed kind of our own little signal system, didn't we?
We did, and working with you was the first time that I really learned how to read someone's eyes and communicate. I knew I had to watch you. I knew that when you looked up at me that you were getting ready to rap, and it was amazing. I just those are such fond memories.
And you'd hold up your little piece of paper, Joe in Island Pond, pissed at Dwayne Lanphier, line 1, right? I mean, it was great. We had so much fun back then.
Eugene.
Eugene.
The list goes on. It was wonderful. At some point here, and I don't know when it happened, but I had heard a rumor that Moody was setting sail and shipping out of Vermont, and there was a lot of there were a lot of people that were like, "Holy shit, Moody's he's paddled into some bigger waters here."
There were a lot of people that said, "Thank God, we wish he'd gotten out of here years ago."
Well, and no surprise that you were. But how did XM Sirius satellite radio? What happened? The phone rang one day. I mean, you were down there calling races anyways. But
it was a series of steps, and it all comes back to Ken. And this is the thing that people need to know about Ken Squire. It would have been in Ken's best interest to keep me in Vermont forever, because we made a ton of money on high school sports in the winter.
Sure.
It literally kept the lights turned on at WDEV.
Yeah, high school sports is a religion.
We do 7 or 8 games a week and think nothing of it. And so it would have been in his best interest to keep me right there as the sports director at WDEV, out there doing, the Lamoille trip and the Randolph trip and everything else. But he didn't. He opened doors for me.
Sure.
And when the Motor Racing Network got to the point where they were doing more races and they needed some fill-in people, not every week, but 5 or 6 times a year, Ken said, "You need to call this guy up here in Vermont. He's pretty good." And they called me, and I started working part-time for them. And then the part-time gig turned into kind of a full-time gig. And for quite a few years there, I would do Thunder Road on Thursday night, get home at midnight, get out of bed at 4 o'clock, head for the Burlington Airport, fly to Philadelphia, jump on another plane, fly to wherever we were doing the race that weekend, do the same thing in reverse on Monday, get home at noon or 2 o'clock, and go on the air with the Sirius XM deal. It was insanity. And moving south had nothing to do with any lack of affection for the Green Mountain State. I still love Vermont and Vermonters.
Sure.
It took me off about 1,000 airplanes a year.
Yeah,
it made things a whole lot easier.
My God, John Stacy saying working at Thunder Road and listening to his voice, we knew a wreck was coming. I mean, how many races did I board up at WDEV, listening to your voice on Thursday nights, and I could tell by the inflection in your voice that a wreck was coming.
Well, and that's just a factor of time and experience. You know these drivers, and you know their habits, and you know who's aggressive, and you know who's going to defend their turf a little too much, and you know who's going to try and take a little more than they should. Yeah. And when those two guys are side by side, the guy that over-defends versus the guy that's over-aggressive, you could tell the people in the grandstands
what's going to happen.
Keep an eye on Joe Dingledorf and Eddie Throckmorton, because they're going to tear it up here in about a lap and a half. And then they do, and the whole grandstand turns around and they think you're Karnak the Magnificent because you saw the future.
Sure.
No, you just knew who was racing each other.
I remember you saying to me, Dave, JD, when I'm announcing at a track, when I'm watching everything that's going on, I am in a complete bubble. I'm totally isolated from the world, from my life, from anything else that's going on in my life, whether it's positive or negative. I am in the moment. I am there right then and there. And you could prick me with a needle, and I wouldn't feel it.
Yeah. And a perfect example of that. There have been many, many times over the years where I'll leave the racetrack at the end of the race on Sunday night and drive to the airport.
Don't even remember the drive.
I'm going through security, right?
Yeah.
And one of the TSA guys is a NASCAR fan, and he sees the MRN shirt.
Yeah.
Were you at the race today? Yes, I was. Who won? And I have to go, hold on a minute. All right, okay, Denny Hamlin won. Give me a minute. I know the answer to this question. Just give me a second.
It's like asking Roger Hill what the forecast is the next day. He doesn't know. Yeah, I mean, we're so caught up.
I think Roger knows.
Well, he does.
Yeah, okay.
You know what I'm trying to say.
But yeah, that's my point. Yes, you are so focused on the immediacy of what's happening in front of you right now that you almost don't even have time to think about what the big picture is.
Isn't that something else? So now you're down in North Carolina. Been down there for how long now?
Almost 13 years.
You got a XM studio built in your home.
I do.
Jesus, man.
Sirius XM. 4 hours a day, Monday through Friday.
What's the name of the show? What time is it on?
Sirius XM Speedway. Weekdays, Monday through Friday, 3 to 7.
All right. 3 to 7.
3 to 7. 4 hours a day.
All right.
It's like 4 inside grooves a day.
On
20 a week.
On steroids.
Crazy.
So some of the outtakes and some of the bloopers, I was like, "Yep, that's Dave. Yep, that's Dave. Yep, that's Dave."
You can either own the bloopers or try and hide them, but when Angie Skinner co-hosted with me, Mike Skinner's wife, the first thing I told her was, once it's out of your mouth, it's never coming back. It's said, and it will be remembered forever.
Sure.
Particularly if you goof it up.
Yeah.
So there's two things you can do. You can either embrace your goof up and laugh at yourself.
Right.
Or you can get all uptight about it and people think, well, boy, there's a stuffed shirt. You might as well just have fun.
Right. Yeah. And you do such an amazing job. I mean, it's just remarkable to even if you really don't religiously follow NASCAR, just to listen to you is always been amazing. And there's plenty of folks that know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, I've been very blessed that I've been around long enough that the vast majority, I was there before any driver that's currently driving in the NASCAR Cup Series. So I'm kind of like the furniture, right? I was there when they arrived.
The Godfather.
Yeah.
As Dan Broussard is saying.
Yeah, I kind of inherited that. But yeah, okay. So the thing is, I've always been there for most of these guys.
Yeah.
So there's a certain level of trust. There's a certain level of familiarity, right? They know that if I find out that they're negotiating with somebody else to change teams next year, I don't run and put it on the air and mess up their deal and get them in trouble.
Right.
I'm trustworthy, and I can sit on something for a couple of months if they need it to be sat on. So just that, and I think, the fact that I've interviewed just about every one of them 1,000 times over the years, it's just what we do.
To listen to you on MRN or anywhere, calling a race, you've got there's you and what, 3 other color announcers.
Depends on the size of the track, but yeah.
You've got how many seconds to go as fast as you can with your mouth to color what's going on?
Yeah. Well, it depends on the track. If I'm at Martinsville, I'm the only turn guy. And for that field to go from turn 2 to turn 4, which is my part of the racetrack, takes about 10 seconds.
Yeah.
At Daytona, to go from turn 1 to turn 2, which is my section, might take 20 seconds.
Yeah.
So sometimes you got a little time, sometimes you don't.
You have to have there's something that's connected in your brain that allows your brain to go from your noggin to your lips at lightning speed.
Eyes to brain to mouth. And quite honestly, some people can do that.
You can.
And
very
some
well.
people can't do that. Ken taught me a lot. But the inherent ability to be able to process what you see and spit it out, you can alter up the verbiage, and a guy like Ken can help you a huge amount in learning how to do that.
And Ken's not very fast. Let's be honest. I mean he can move along, but he's not He doesn't move like Dave Moody.
Well, but maybe he just hasn't got as big a mouth as I do. But listen, yes, I was blessed with that. And my mom can show you report cards from 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th grade. And I was always a reasonably good student. But over on the right side of the report card was always the behavioral ones.
Yeah.
And basically what it always came down to is the only smirch on my report card every year as a child was if he could just be quiet and pay attention, he'd be a much better student even than he is. If he could just stop being the class clown, if he could just stop talking and pay attention, he'd be much better
If
off.
you can think that fast and bring it to the mouth that fast, why not be a lawyer, Dave?
I've been asked that before.
Have you?
I think it's because I did not hate school. I hated studying. And I was smart enough, all the way through grade school and junior high and high school. I don't think I brought home 3 books in 15 years. I didn't have to study.
Right.
All I had to do was sit in class, reasonably pay attention, and I could pass all the tests easily. I went to college at the University of Vermont, and the world changed in a hurry.
Yeah.
And
sure.
I didn't have the study skills because I had never done it before.
Yeah.
And I teetered on the brink. At the end of my sophomore year, they weren't at all sure they were going to let me come back because part of the problem was I didn't know how to study and I didn't really care to.
Sure.
And the other problem was I had a final exam coming up on Monday, but I was jumping in the car going to the Waterford Speed Bowl in Connecticut on Saturday and then back up to Oxford Plains on Sunday, and I'd get home at 5 o'clock in the morning and I'd sleep through my morning class. That was a bit of an issue too. Every time I've come to a road between real life and racing, I've always gone the racing route, and I'm not sure it was always the best choice, but it worked out okay.
We have a lot of questions here, but how do you when the guy that's track announcing who's ahead of you is going, he's going 100 miles an hour too.
Yep.
He's flying. How do you know when he's done and it's your turn to jump in without stepping on him?
I know roughly where on the racetrack he's going to stop. I know usually I'm the lead turn guy, and I'm in turn 1 and 2. And he's talking about the leaders coming down the front straightaway, and I know when they get to turn 1, right about there, he's going to stop, and I'm expected to start.
Right.
So having that piece of knowledge,
without a hair of a second of pause.
No, well, hopefully not. But when you have that knowledge, listening is one of the biggest skills because you listen to what they're saying, and after you've worked with each other for as long as we have, we finish each other's sentences anyway. We order for each other at the restaurant.
That's it.
So if you know where they're going to stop and you know where you're supposed to start, you can almost pick up their sentence in mid-sentence.
I don't think anyone could edit that tightly.
Oh, no. And people think we do. People think that we've got, you used to be my board op.
Yeah.
They think that we have a board op
Yeah.
that when they get to turn 1, they pot one guy up and one guy down, and that we're all talking constantly.
No,
There's not a board op on the planet that could make that
No,
work.
your mics are all hot. Have to be.
You just push the button when it's your turn. And if there's a
Unbelievable.
wreck, the number one cardinal rule is if there's a wreck in your area, you push the button and you say trouble in turn 1, and that means everybody else has to shut the hell up because the wreck overrules everything else. You
Wow.
call the wreck.
Have you thought about writing a book?
Yeah. Haven't done it yet. I need a few more people to die so I don't get sued. Maybe one day.
I understand that. I really do. What happened at Loudon last weekend?
Martin Truex Jr. stunk up the show. And there's nobody better than him. When he's got a perfect race car and no mistakes get made on pit road, he will demolish the field. He did it in the Coca-Cola 600 at Charlotte a few years ago, where he led like 580 out of 600 miles.
Yep.
And he did the same thing at Loudon. He took the lead at the start, and he never let go of it. And he is just so good. And he's like a pit bull on a porterhouse steak when he's got a good race car. He's just not going to let it go, and he sure didn't.
What was? Tell me about where you were and what you were doing and everything when we lost Dale Earnhardt.
Well, it was one of those deals. I was just really getting started as a full-time guy at MRN at that point. That was 2001. And so I wasn't in Daytona. Eli Gold would go down and work the Daytona 500, And then, he'd get busy doing Alabama football and all the other stuff he does. He'd disappear about the time spring football kicked in, and then I'd show up. So I was not physically there when Earnhardt died, but I can tell you that a lot of people I know were. And within 3 to 5 minutes of the time that accident happened, my phone started lighting up, and it became very clear that it was a pretty serious situation. And you knew when TV showed the ambulance driving out of the tunnel with no sirens, no flashing red lights, no speed, no sense of urgency, you knew then that either he was perfectly fine, which he clearly wasn't based on the amount of time it took to get him out of the car, or things were bad.
We're going to talk about some of the newer cars and what's going on with NASCAR today. But Diane is saying, ask him how many nicknames he has given drivers at Thunder Road.
Oh, Lord.
And how did he come up with them?
They've either got to come organically or they don't come at all. And over the years, I would have guys, they'd show up at the track with their brand new street stock or their brand new Warrior for the first time, and they'd walk up to the tower and they'd hand me a sheet of paper, and they'd say, my name is Sid Schlabotnik, but my crew calls me Sexy Sid. And I'd look him in the eye and I'd say, your crew does not call you Sexy Sid. Nobody has ever called you Sexy Sid, and I'm not going to call you Sexy Sid. Just go drive your race car, and if you do something that sets you in line for a nickname, you'll get a nickname, but that's not how it happens.
Yeah, right.
Not how it happens at all. The way it happens is, I'm going way back to the Catamount Stadium days. Rupert Irwin from Waterbury shows up with his brand new car for the first race of the year, goes out onto the track for the first practice of the first race of the new year, and in turn one of lap one of the first practice of the first race of the new year, goes right off the top of turn one and rolls it 4 times bucket over tea kettle and immediately becomes Rupert Flipper Irwin. And he raced for a number of years, and he was Flipper the whole time. And he hasn't raced now for probably 20 years.
Yeah.
And there are people that think his name is Flip because they've never heard him called anything else.
Speaking of getting a little bit of air in the hair, I was pushing the buttons back at the studio at WDEV when you were calling that race where Tracy Belrose
left the building.
Yeah. What a wreck, Dave.
Yeah, that was, as Ken used to call him, that was a quality crash.
Yes, it was. Stand by, because I'm going to be asking you what your most memorable wreck is, or maybe the top 3 at T Road. Okay. But that was a doozy, man.
It was. She was racing to the outside of Joey Becker, and Joey had a right front suspension failure going into turn 3. And that was before they had the wall all the way around the racetrack. And I know some of the racers like to bitch and moan about having a wall all the way around the racetrack.
Right.
The people that complain about it never went off the top of turn 3 or the top of turn 2 sideways and flipped 37 times, because you would do that. It was about 40 feet airborne straight into the basement at that time. So, yeah, Tracy, he broke, slid up the track into her at high speed. She flew off the top of turn 3, planted the nose of the car in the dirt on landing, and catapulted over the top of a 12-foot-high chain-link fence and never touched it, and ended up not in the parking lot but in the access road that goes back to the pits, and basically thought she was dead. Yeah. There was no way. Sure. And she climbed out, and she was perfectly fine, and they put her in the ambulance. They brought her back to the pits. They put the remains of her race car on the flatbed and brought it back. She climbed out of the ambulance just about the time that they brought her car back, and she saw what little was left of it. And at that point, she started bawling because she knew her race car was dead. But prior to that, I'm fine. Let's go. Can we fix it? I can still make the consi.
I remember being the board op that night.
Tough girl.
I had to pee wicked. And as you know, the bathroom from the control room at WDEV was about 1.5 miles. Couldn't leave.
No.
Could not leave.
Right.
It was amazing.
You could have told me, I could have filled.
Yeah, Dave, go to break.
I could have tap danced a little,
Run some spots. I gotta go. These young drivers that are that are coming out of the woodwork in Central Vermont and beyond are unbelievable. Stephen Donahue is absolutely destroying things.
I hate him.
And
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why I hate him.
The whole family is it's in their blood, man. Stephen Donahue he's just kicking ass.
He is.
Did you see the fire?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I watch virtually every race from home. I crank up the Flow Racing on the internet and I put it on my big TV. I hate Stephen Donahue though, and I'll tell you why. He's a wonderful kid, but he reminds me how old I am.
Right.
Because I've called races with Stephen Donahue in them.
Yeah.
I've called races with his father, Irish John Donahue, in them. And I called races with his grandfather, Paul Donahue, in them. That really hacks me off that I am old enough to have called 3 generations of racers at Thunder Road.
He was on Aired Out shortly before that wreck and said that his worst fear was fire in the car.
Sure.
Take anything else.
Yeah.
Just doesn't want to see the orange. And here he is sliding upside down on the track.
So you're to blame is what you're saying. You jinxed him. Yeah.
Full of flame, and he got out of there.
Scary.
With a burned hand, a broken hand, other injuries. Mm-hmm. And then look what he did a few days later.
48 hours later, he won the late model feature at Groveton. He's a Donahue. What do you expect? I mean, your grandfather raced, your father raced, your uncle raced, you race. Yeah, you race. You go.
Marcel Gravel's another one. We've had so many drivers share a mic with us, and you know me, Dave. I don't know what I'm talking about when it comes to short track racing.
You fake it well, though. You're good.
But to have these drivers come in and tell me, not necessarily the stats, but the passion behind what they do and why they do it, and the money, and the time, and the family that has to stand next to them and support them is remarkable.
It's amazing. Yeah,
you have to have a whole family that
be
is
your life.
Turning wrenches with you in the garage, booting you in the ass when you need it, supporting you financially and otherwise.
Right.
They're all there.
Yeah.
Have you seen this little Walker Fitch?
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah. There are a lot of really good young racers. And, that's one of the
He's
real
in a Mustang.
joys for me.
He's like 10 years old.
Yeah, sure. Why not start him young? But that's the neat part about it because you watch these kids, they come out in the Warrior division, right? And Marcel Gravel started out in street stocks and moved up to the Tigers, and now he is a championship caliber late model racer. He's one of the best.
Yeah.
Jason Corliss started out in the street stocks, moved up to Tigers, and now he's won every monument race. They've got the big races, the Memorial Day Classic, the Milk Bowl, the Labor Day Classic. If you win, you get your name on those granite monuments up behind the announcer's tower. Those are the ones everybody wants to win. And you look back in the day, and it's Dave Dion, Robbie Crouch. And then you look down at the bottom, and it's Jason Corliss. He's as good as any of them ever were. And it's so cool to have said, I remember him when he was trying to figure out where the turns were in the street stock.
Yeah. He was Jason was on the air with us, too. We actually sat and shared a beer on the air, and it was just
Shocking.
wonderful. It was wonderful. I mean, it was just
Wait, there's beer?
Well, at times.
I mean, it's 9:30, but still.
But he's just such a humble dude, man.
Yeah. Squire said it right. Common men performing uncommon deeds.
Yeah, right.
From whether you're talking about
what a podcast that is, too, by the way.
Yeah, well, they do a good job.
Amazing.
Whether it's whether it's the Cup guys at Daytona or a kid in the street stocks. One of the things that Ken taught me very, very early on, he said, there's a star in every race. That guy may pick up your garbage tomorrow morning, but tonight at Thunder Road, he's a hero.
Yeah.
And that's the neat part about it.
Some of these drivers, I always try to push them a little bit, saying, who's your enemy on the track? Who are you looking to trade paint with? And at least on the microphones, anyway, they seem so humble and so respectful.
Plus, you don't want to warn them.
Yeah.
right? You don't want them to know you're coming. But no,
Sure.
if you race at Thunder Road, and a friend of mine, Nathan, he's from New Hampshire, and he owns one of the cars. A kid named Cody Schoolcraft. That's a rookie in the late model division this year. They fielded cars all over New England, from out of Claremont, New Hampshire, modifieds, super late models, street stocks, whatever. And he was never a fan of the ACT package. Crate engines, it's not real racing. He finally broke down and built an ACT late model, and he's been at Thunder Road this year. And they've struggled a bit. People do when they come to Thunder Road. And he said a couple of weeks ago, I've never raced with a more respectful group of racers than the guys at Thunder Road, and I've never been challenged by a race car the way I am these ACT late model cars. And he's exactly right, because when you race at Thunder Road, you can get in trouble all by yourself. You can lose a race car any night without anybody making a mistake.
Sure.
So you can't be a rough rider at Thunder Road. I mean, you'll be bankrupt in a month if you're out there throwing fenders. It's just too easy to lose race cars.
Chris and Pat have done such a great job up there. The lighting, the spectator viewing now. They've got some tailgating up there. They've changed the track a little bit. A lot of talk about what is that turn? What's the bad turn there? Jesus,
the Widowmaker.
The Widowmaker. Thank you.
Come on.
A lot of chat about that.
Yeah.
What say you about some of the changes up there?
Oh, I love it. I love it. Pat Malone scared the hell out of people when they found out that he was part of the new ownership group. People were terrified that he was going to bulldoze Thunder Road and build condos or a strip mall or whatever. And I mentioned that to him very early on in the tenure. I said, people are scared to death of you. Because Pat and I went to school together. And he looked at me and he says, that's bullshit, right? I said, well, yeah, I know that, but they don't know that.
Right.
Pat Malone grew up just like I did. He went to Thunder Road from the time he was old enough to ride his bike to get there.
Sure.
He loves that place. Pat Malone is the last guy on the planet that you need to worry about plowing up Thunder Road to build condos. There's no way in the world.
Becky's saying, let's not forget the Dragon family.
Who?
The Dragon family.
Who? No, yeah, they're awesome people. And that's another one. I spent time at Loudon last weekend with Bobby and Beaver.
Yeah.
And, they're in their 70s now.
Yeah.
Well, late 70s probably, because I'm in my early 60s.
Yeah.
And we were up on stage, and we're just telling stories. Bobby and Beaver and Dave Dion and Brad Layton and Andy Santerre. And we just had a blast. It's like, we don't see each other for a year and a half, but the minute we do, it's just like, remember the day? And we just start telling stories.
What was it like for you when we lost Tom Curley? What was it like working with Tom Curley? What do you say about Tom Curley as a whole, and how do you think he would feel about the track today with what Chris and Pat have done?
Yeah, he would love it. Yeah, he would love what they have done. He would love the fact that they are keeping that track at the forefront of New England motorsport.
Sure.
He could be a challenge. He had that fiery Irish temper going on, and
did you ever fight with him?
Oh, hell yes. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I stood next to Tom Curley in various officials' boxes at various racetracks around the Northeast for 30 years. And we had 3 or 4, real set twos. Yeah, not like, well, I don't know. A couple of them maybe could have come to blows if it had been handled a little differently. But he was a guy that he was a my way or the highway kind of guy. And he wasn't big on compromise. He couldn't even spell negotiation. And let me say this correctly, he was a genius in terms of promoting auto racing. He could look 5 years down the road and know where to position his racers and his racetrack and his tours. He never said, damn, I never saw that coming, because he saw it before anybody. He didn't always have the personal skills to make it work as well as it could have. There were days where I loved the man and would have walked on fire for him, but there were also days where if I'd had a gun, I would have shot him. And anybody that knew Tom knows exactly what I'm talking about, because he was polarizing. Love, hate. Anybody that ever worked for him I don't know anybody that ever worked for him that didn't quit at least twice, but come back 3 times. That's just kind of the way he was.
NASCAR today, some of these next-gen cars, there is so much going. You're talking about it all the time on your Sirius satellite, XM Sirius satellite show. What say you about some of these next-gen cars and what's happening?
It had to happen.
You say also that there's quite the culture war that's going on in NASCAR.
Oh, absolutely so. Yeah, there's an absolute culture war going on. The owners in our sport 5 years ago, still to a large degree because things don't change overnight, but 5 years ago, the owners in our sport were guys like Rick Hendrick, who's a billionaire, from the automotive industry, so has auto dealerships all up and down the East Coast. Joe Gibbs, who made his money in other places. Roger Penske, who's a billionaire, makes his money from other places. And these guys could spend $20, $30 million a year on racing because they loved it and never worry about whether the money made sense or not, whether the business model made any sense. Well, it didn't. It absolutely didn't. We're the only professional sport in the world where you need a $30 million sponsor to break even. And it's insanity. And NASCAR eventually said, we got to fix this. We've got to fix this. And the problem is the big teams could afford to remanufacture, reimagine, reproduce every single one of the hundreds and hundreds of parts on these cars. They could re-engineer them every single day in search of more speed. They could have 50 engineers on staff to figure out ways to make your Panhard bar mount more efficient. And then they'd have 100 fabricators on staff to build all of these different ideas that the engineers have. And then they'd take them out and test them. And if it didn't work, they'd throw it in the dumpster and they'd start again tomorrow. And if it did work, they'd still start again tomorrow, trying to make the part they just made better still tomorrow. Now, all of those engineers and all those fabricators and all that testing and all those hotel rooms, the business model made no sense at all. So NASCAR said, we're going to have a chassis, and it's available from one supplier. And everybody goes and buys the same thing, and they do not touch it under penalty of death. Every part and piece on that race car comes from a designated manufacturer at a set price. You can't modify it. You can't change it. There's still a lot of ways that you can make your car better than the next guy's, but that continual reinventing of the wheel, the endless 24 hours a day, 365 days a year of building a better mousetrap, that's over now. And as a result, you're seeing a lot of mid-sized teams and what used to be back of the pack teams. They're a whole lot closer to the front than they used to be. And you've got new owners, guys like Justin Marks coming into the game saying, okay, it finally makes sense. I'm going to institute all the ideas that I've had for years and never could institute because it just costs too much money. A guy like Justin Marks comes in with Trackhouse Racing. In the first 3 years, they've won 4 or 5 races. They came about 50 feet from winning the championship last year, and everybody's saying, who the hell is this guy? He's a genius. Well, he was a genius 10 years ago. He just could not afford to come and play.
Dave, I'm going to make you feel even older, man. I've got an 8-year-old little girl at home. And I can't help but sit here. I'm listening to you, and I'm thinking of her just recently with me making our Pinewood Derby car.
Mm-hmm.
And she had the axle, which, of course, is the nail, and we were filing it away with a Dremel to try to make it spin faster.
Sure.
I can't help but think about these things as I'm hearing you, man.
Yeah.
And she says to me, Dad, are we allowed to do this?
And if you're a real racer, you look at the rule book and you look and you're
graphite dust in there.
You say it doesn't say we can't. It doesn't say we can, but it doesn't say we can't.
But is NASCAR? There's a lot of people that are saying that NASCAR is being too hypersensitive with this, and they're just throwing penalties out everywhere at everything.
Here who's not saying that. We hear that from fans. We hear that from drivers.
You're hearing that from a lot of your fans.
Mm-hmm. We hear it from fans. We hear it from drivers. We hear it from crew chiefs. But you want to guess who we don't hear that from? Owners. Owners.
Isn't that it? That's interesting.
Because the owners are the ones that came to NASCAR and said, you've got to save us from ourselves. We are going to spend ourselves into extinction if you don't get this under control. They signed off whole hog on this new car. and the theories behind it. And they said, draw a very clear line in the sand about what we can and cannot do, and then penalize the crap out of us if we step over that line. And there have been times where NASCAR's had to do exactly that. And the drivers raise hell, and the fans raise hell, and the crew chiefs raise hell, and the owners say absolutely nothing because it's exactly what they needed.
You're seeing this. You're hearing this. How often?
Daily. That's the culture war that we're getting ready to talk about a minute ago. Ouch. Because for 75 years now, the attitude around NASCAR has been, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough.
Right, and that's racing.
I know he must be cheating because I'm cheating and he's beating me.
Yeah, he's cheating better.
Right, and we are going to war right now over the last couple of years trying to get that attitude out of our sport. We're the only sport in the world where cheating is not only tolerated, but it's encouraged. It would be like, if Gaylord Perry gets thrown out of the baseball game for throwing the spitball and the crowd stands up and gives him a round of applause. Boy, old Gaylord Perry, he's sure trying hard, isn't he? What a competitor, what a desire. No, they say, well, that dirty dog's cheating. That's wrong. He can't do that. We're the only sport where cheating is not only okay,
why not
encouraged.
NASCAR? Yeah.
Fighting the battle, trying to get rid of it, but it's uphill.
Really uphill. How long will this? How do you think things are going to pan out? Fast forward 10 years from now, 5 years from now, where's it going to be?
Well, I think this new car, and this is just my personal opinion, this new car saved the sport because in 7 or 8 more years, we went from every car on the circuit having one sponsor on the car all year long. They'd come in for, $7-8 million, and they could be on the car every race all year long. In recent years, there are maybe 1 or 2 sponsors that are on the car every race because it's now a $30 million deal. It's gone from $7 million in the 80s to $30 million now, and it's not going to stop until we stop it. And at some point, it's going to be $40 million, and at some point, it's going to be $50 million. And there are very few corporations out there. There are very few Fortune 500 companies that can put $30, $40, $50 million into a marketing program for NASCAR. So it had to change. It had to change. The pool of potential owners and sponsors in this sport was getting smaller and smaller and smaller by the year. And if they didn't turn it around, it was going to come to a crashing end.
Is technology the friend here?
No, it's not. And here's the problem. A few years ago, the owners said, they used to be able to go out and test anytime they want.
Yeah.
So they'd be at the racetrack Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday.
Yeah.
And as soon as the race was over, they'd jump on an airplane and they'd go to a different racetrack and spend 3 days testing before they went on to the next racetrack to race.
Yeah.
Ridiculously expensive. And the owners said, NASCAR, save us from ourselves. Don't let us test anymore. So NASCAR said, okay, you can't test anymore.
Yeah, right.
And the teams went out and spent $20 million on simulators where they don't have to test anymore. They just have an engineer strike a few keys on the keyboard and the computer tests for them. And they put the driver in the simulator on Monday and Tuesday, and he spends 8 hours driving the track that they're going to be racing this weekend,
right.
Trying out different setups on their car without actually touching a real race car. So that's the thing with racers. You save them a nickel here,
Sure.
And they'll say, great, I've got a nickel now. I'm going to go spend a dime.
Right. Patrick Tibbetts, the racing mailman.
Yes, sir.
What a guy. What a guy.
Yep.
We love him. He says, ask Dave, does he ever see NASCAR being a major travel sport like World of Outlaws? 3 races a week type deal.
God, I hope not.
Across the country.
No.
Big shot drivers pulling into town, taking on the local gunslingers with cost apparently coming down. Could this work?
It could, but I hope it doesn't. I think what the World of Outlaws does is amazing. They'll run 100 to 110 races a year. Very few run them all, but they'll come to town. They'll race in Idaho, and they'll get 15 or 20 Idaho sprint car racers that'll show up to take on the big dogs. Sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but it's great for the fans.
Sure.
I don't think that the NASCAR Cup Series needs to do everything that every other successful series does.
Right.
I think NASCAR is right about where they need to be. I don't think they need more races. I understand because when you race more, it costs more.
Sure.
Right? It costs more to run 50 races than it does 36. I think they're in a pretty good spot right now. They're in position where, TV ratings are such a weird deal because nothing gets the ratings it got 20 years ago. There's just too much going on out there.
Are the yeah,
but
the ratings are TV ratings for NASCAR are taking a hit here.
TV ratings for everything have taken a hit.
Yeah,
I mean everything they've taken a hit, with the possible exception of the NFL, which is the 800-pound sports gorilla in the room. But the thing that you look at with NASCAR is they are the number 1 or number 2 rated sports program on the air every single weekend. They're number 1 and sometimes number 2. And that's what these networks want, right? Whatever the numbers are, that's what they are. But if you're number 1 or number 2, they're going to want you. And I had a conversation with somebody, one of the upper-level managers at Fox a couple of years ago. And the premise was, why don't you just do something that's a little cheaper? Because they spend billions of dollars to get the rights to these NASCAR races. And he's like, we've got to put something on the air. Right? We're not going to put a test pattern up on Sunday afternoon because, it's too expensive to compete. We've got to go head-to-head with college football. We've got to go head-to-head with the NFL. We'd much rather have the NASCAR race on that finishes number 1 or number 2 than put on, the American Cornhole Association and have 37 viewers. So there's going to be something on NBC, and there's going to be something on Fox. They really want it to be NASCAR because they can command still, whatever the ratings are, they're still number 1 or number 2 for the weekend.
Comparatively, I'm wondering how the ratings are doing in other parts of the world with Formula One racing.
Formula One's kind of a different deal.
It is.
Because NASCAR races 38 times in the United States, 36 point counting races and a couple of exhibitions. Formula One comes to your country once a year.
Yeah.
Once a year.
Right.
So if you're in Italy, you get to go to Monza once a year. You get to sit down in front of the TV and turn it on and watch the Italian Grand Prix at Monza once a year. And
if you're in Vermont, you can run up to Canada once a year, right?
Well, yes, you can. But my point is this. When you have one opportunity per year to do something, you're going to take that opportunity. I'll go to camp next week. I'll go to the movies the week after. It's Monza weekend, and I'm going to Monza. When you live in the United States, there's probably going to be at least 4 or 5 NASCAR races within 3 hours drive. And at a lot of these racetracks, there are 2.
Yeah.
So if I don't make the spring race, what the hell? I'll go in the fall. It's no big deal. I'll go to the wedding. I'll go to my class reunion. I'll go to the beach, and we'll just plan on going to the track in the fall. So it's a different deal.
Very interesting, and God, I gotta listen to more of you on this because it's fascinating, and I love to learn about this.
I've got opinions.
Monday through Friday, 3 to 7. Dave Moody on XM Sirius Satellite Radio. Matt Trapani are saying, ask Dave to tell the Tom Curley Indian Reservation story. Never gets old.
Oh my God. Okay. All right.
And if we need to not do it,
no. It's family friendly. It's just there was a time where ACT had a very generous sponsorship from GM of Canada, General Motors of Canada, and as part of that deal, when we raced north of the border, they would videotape the races live on site. They'd go back to Toronto, and they'd edit the package down to 1 hour, and it would air a few weeks later on TSN, which is the Canadian version of ESPN. And I would go to Toronto and sit in this tiny little booth. It was like a broom closet with another guy, and we would voice over this race weeks after the fact. So Curly and I would always have to drive. About once a month, we'd drive from Barrie, Montpelier, Waterbury to Toronto.
You were in a car that long with Curly?
Yes. 8 hours. 8 hours to get there, 2 hours to voice over the show, and 8 hours home. Oh. So I tell that story to tell this story. We're coming home one night, and it's 2 a.m. And one of his favorite shortcuts was to get off the 401 and to come down through the Akwesasne Indian Reservation. And it would save like 45 minutes off our trip. which at that time of night, that's significant.
Sure.
So we get there and we pull off and we're ready to go through, and we get to the edge of the native reservation, and the New York State Police are there. They've got roadblocks, blue lights everywhere. We pull up, Curly rolls, and we're in the ACT pace car, which is far from stock. Okay, it's a mover. So Curly pulls up, rolls down the window. What's going on, officer? And I'm not going to be politically correct here,
Please
but I'll tell you what the police officer said.
It's called aired out bid.
Yeah.
You can say anything you want.
He said, we're having another Indian uprising. He said they're pissed off because the government's trying to charge them taxes on their cigarettes, and they've got bonfires built in the middle of the road, and we do not advise you to go in there. Jesus Christ, that's going to cost us 45 minutes. It's going to cost us an hour and a half by the time we go back and go the other way. And the guy's like, well, I don't recommend you go in. If you go in there and you get in trouble, we can't come get you. And Curly's like, now, wait a minute. And I saw the gears going in his head, and I said, oh, geez, this is going to be bad.
If we go fast enough.
Curly says, so what you're telling me is, if we continue on through, we're on our own, but there are no speed limits, there are no New York State Police until we get to the other side of the reservation. And the cop says, well, technically that's true, but I'd like to repeat. And Tom says right in mid-sentence, he interrupts and he goes, thank you, officer, mats the gas and burns rubber.
He was driving?
He was driving. I'm in the passenger seat. So we are flying down these 2-lane roads at like 97 miles an hour. And we come up over the hill, and sure as hell, they've got about a 40-foot tall bonfire burning right in the middle of the road. There are probably 200 people standing around this fire. And Curly doesn't slow down. He speeds up. We go from 97 to 107, and he leans on the horn. And I said, Tom, I'll be the one underneath the dashboard. Good luck to you. We went flying through there, and there was probably room between the bonfire and the ditch. There was room for our car plus an inch.
Oh, my God.
And he went through there at about 100 miles an hour, and all you saw was people diving out of the way. I mean, diving into the ditches. I think a couple of them jumped into the fire because it was safer than standing. And we went blowing through there.
Do you have the pace car lights on?
Oh, yeah. He turned the pace car lights on. He's laying on the horn. Here we come. And we go flying through there. He looks in the rearview mirror, and he sees that we're through and we're clear, and he goes, God damn it, 45 minutes saved. And we just went on home. It's amazing.
Are you going to be next? Are you going to be next to Aaron tonight? Is Aaron going to be next to you? Where are you going to be tonight?
No, I stay out of Aaron's way.
Okay.
It's his job now. Mm-hmm. He does a great job. He's got his shtick. He's got his deal. He's got his way of doing things. And the last thing in the world I would do is show up there and big time him and take the microphone out of his hands. No, I'll probably sit up on Bud Hill for a minute.
Wow.
I'll go over to turn 3 for a minute with some friends of mine. I got some friends that sit in the main grandstands. I'll hang out in the pits. I'll have a hell of a time. But you're going to find this hard to believe, but I don't feel the need to be on the microphone every time I go to a racetrack. It's kind of cool to just be a spectator.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
How's Tom doing?
Tom.
I'm sorry, not Ken Squire.
He has good days and he has bad days. He's like my mom. He's 88 years old.
Yeah.
He had a real close shave with COVID. We very near probably should have lost him.
Sure.
He's had a series of health challenges over the last, beginning about a year before COVID and continuing on. I go see him when I'm home.
Yeah.
We talk on the phone periodically. I talk to his daughter Ashley all the time. I won't say daily, but certainly every other week or so, Kenley updates.
Yeah.
As he said to me once, I'm in pretty good shape for the shape I'm in. And I think that's probably the best way.
Have you had a chance to see him in the last few days since you've been home?
No, I have not. I've been so up to my earlobes.
Does he get to the track?
He hasn't a lot. And I hope I'm not telling stories out of school, but Ashley says on Thursday mornings he wakes up and says, "Make your plans. We're going to Thunder Road tonight." And by noon I can't do it.
Yeah,
can't do it. You know, it's my mom. Like my mom's the same age. She's 88 years old, and she said, "Old age is not for sissies."
Yeah. Wow. Understatement.
Yeah.
First responder night tonight. Dave, you're going to be there as a spectator.
Yep.
I'm sure you're looking forward to it. What time? What are we looking at for timing?
Regular
tonight?
7 o'clock start. Four Thunder Road divisions: late models, Tigers, Street Stocks, and Warriors. And they're just going to go up there and have a good old time and salute some people that have done amazing work in the last 10 days.
I hope Mother Nature will cooperate. She has been a real bitch.
It's going to be gorgeous tonight. They're saying they're saying 75 to 82 degrees. Beautiful sunny skies.
And then rain going to be moving into the picture tonight. Flood watch again tomorrow.
Jeez,
It's unbelievable,
it's
man.
insanity.
Listen, let's close out this morning by saying, go to the race tonight.
Yep.
Unplug for a little while.
Take a break, folks.
Take a break.
Come on out. Yeah.
Go to the race.
We'll have a good time.
Enjoy the experience.
Yep.
We're all going to be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Vermonters are a resilient bunch.
Always have been fine.
Always.
It's going to
always.
take a minute, but we're going to do what Vermont does.
Yeah. Thanks, Dave.
It's my pleasure, man.
Thanks.
It's been
Jesus.
far too long.
It's
I'm
amazing.
sorry it took this long.
Yeah, it took a long time, and here we are in a temporary studio. But I hope that that you can come back and we're going to rebuild, and we'll be back out on North Main Street in Barrie. And 5 years now of aired out.
Good for you, man. And maybe we'll come back. Maybe we can slip in a Lamoille, PA girls basketball game while I'm home next.
Be fun.
I can start yelling at you because you played the wrong commercial or something.
Did you ever do that?
No,
never.
You never played the wrong commercial. You were spot on. That's what made you the multimedia superstar you are today.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks for coming in.
Always a pleasure.
We
Thank
love you, man.